I'm Julie Herman of Jaybird Quilts, and welcome back to the Quilts for Baby and Beyond Sew Along. Today we are going to be working on Color Wheel. I absolutely love this quilt, and this specific quilt I just took out of my living room to hang up on the wall here. It gets used every day in my living room. My kids love it, so it has been washed many times, super crinkly, and loved upon. This quilt is one of the largest quilts in the book, but it goes together very fast due to the large pieces. If you take a look, each block is only made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pieces. So 10 times 6, 60 pieces, goes together very fast. It's nice and bright and bold, kind of reminds me of a box of crayons, hence naming it Color Wheel. So let's jump right on in and get started. I made the original Color Wheel quilt using Kona cottons. Those colors are listed on page 7 if you're interested in using the same ones that I did. Today, I'm going to be using Free Spirit solids, a mix of their collection and of Tula Pink solids to make this new Color Wheel quilt. If you're interested in using these colors, they were included in today's email, and the information is also in the comments below. First step is to cut your fabric following the pattern directions. You will be using 18 fabrics, 3 in each colorway, in a gradient of a dark, a medium, and a light. So you see here for this one, I went with more of like pinks, corals, yellow, more of a jade green, blue, and purple. After cutting your diamonds and triangles, there's one more tip that will help out with your arranging of pieces and sewing them together. And that is to cut off your sharp points and turn them into blunt points. You can see I've already done that here with the diamonds. Now I need to go ahead and do that with my triangles. So what that looks like, you can do one layer at a time until you're comfortable, and then once you feel comfortable, you can do multiple layers at a time. So you're going to take your sharp point. If you're right-handed, these are your directions. If you're left-handed, I'll show you that in a moment. So if you're right-handed, put your sharp point to your right, take your super Sidekick ruler, line it up on top. Make sure you can see that. We're going to line up the edge of our ruler up here and our solid black line down here. We're going to simply trim off that sharp point, rotate this piece, and do that again. It's helpful to do this with all 4 triangles, as it will help with your alignment to sewing them to the diamonds and completing each block. Now, if you are left-handed, you are going to take your triangle, place your point to the left, take your ruler, line it up with your solid line, and your edge of your ruler, trim. So once you have those done, then we'll continue on with our construction. Construction directions begin on page 54. Go ahead and take your triangles and arrange them so that they are pointed down with your grain across the top. Your medium colored diamonds like this, again with the grain here, bias here, and then your dark colored diamonds like this. You have 1 extra triangle, so go ahead and take 1 out of your stack and set that aside. Not 2, just 1. And we're going to head on over to the machine and we're going to piece here and make 3 identical units that look like this. So we're simply going to take these 2. And now that we have our notched corner, we're going to know exactly where to line things up. We're going to flip this on, line that up right there. Line this up down here. So scant 1/4 inch seam. Go ahead and we're going to press that open. And then we're going to sew this piece, the 3rd darkest one, on here. And again, we know where that lines up because we've trimmed off our sharp points. And now when it comes to thread, I generally piece with a medium gray. I find it blends into most things. But since here we are working with predominantly single colored blocks, if you prefer, you can go ahead and use a pink thread to sew all of your pink blocks, blue thread to sew your blue blocks, so forth and so on, and then switch back to a gray or a blender thread when you go to sew and assemble all of your blocks into your quilt top. That's up to you. I have a medium pink diamond, a light pink triangle, and as I showed over the cutting area, I'm going to go ahead, place those right sides together. I am sewing with a 2.5 stitch length and a scant 1/4 inch. Scant 1/4 inch is just 1 thread over this way, a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch. Just allows for the amount of thread that will get eaten in the seam allowance. It's the same that we've been using for all the other projects. Just going to go ahead and sew this. And since I know that I want 3 units exactly the same, instead of taking that one off to sew my 3rd diamond, I'm just going to go ahead and continue, and I'm going to chain piece the other 2 identical ones. Now that I have the first 2 together, I'm going to take my dark pink diamond and add that in here. So again, same scant 1/4 inch seam, and I'm going to use my blunt point as my alignment. I'm not pinning these, but if you feel more comfortable doing that, by all means. And I'm going to repeat that to finish all 3. Now that I have all of these sewn, it's time to press them. I suggest pressing open. There's no opportunity for anything to nest in this project, and things will lay flattest and best if you press them open. So I'm just going to begin by finger pressing them. And then I'm going to take my heat resistant stiletto and I'm going to press. And quick reminder, pressing is up and down with a little bit of wiggle. We don't want to push our iron. We can stretch our bias that way. We do have a fair bit of bias that we're working with. We don't want to stretch that and distort any of our shapes. So I'm going to go ahead and press the seams open on all 3 of these. To achieve the block that we are creating for Color Wheel, we're going to do what's called a partial seam. And that means we're going to sew part of this seam. We're going to stop, leave part of it open, construct the rest of the block, and then come back to finish the seam. So what that's going to look like is we're going to take our single remaining triangle, place it right here above our dark diamond. And diagrams of this are in the middle of page 54. Going to take our triangle, we're going to flip it onto our piece, and we're going to align this corner that has been trimmed to this corner. Place a pin, and this point that has been cut off should line up with where that intersection is. So I have it pulled down to kind of show you, but that point is going to line up there. And we're going to pin this to keep this in place for right now, but we don't want to sew over there. So one tip that I find that is helpful to tell myself, stop sewing, that's not where you want to be, is I will do 2 pins. So I will place 1 pin, followed by another pin right after it. And that's my visual to myself that I want to sew to here and stop. That's a trick I've been doing for some time. If you find it helpful, go ahead and do that. So we're going to head back to the machine and we're going to sew this seam halfway down here. So I'm on my machine, and as I mentioned, we are going to sew a scant 1/4 inch seam from this point to halfway down the block, and then we're going to stop. Now, I don't think it's necessary to backstitch at this point because we're going to stitch over that. If you feel more comfortable, you can do that, but it's not necessary. So we're simply going to use either our thread cutter on our machine or take the project off like this, trim those threads, and I do suggest sewing back onto your leader ender so you don't end up with a nest of threads. And we're going to head over to the iron to press this. Now that our partial seam is sewn, it's time to press it. And at this time, we're not really worried about what's going on over here. We're going to work with this part later. What we are worried about is right here, because our next piece is going to go in here. So we really only need to focus on pressing about 1 inch, 1.5 inches. I'm not going to take care of the rest of that now. I'm going to leave that together for when we sew that seam. So I'm going to finger press this open, and I'm just going to press the very beginning of it. That's all we need to do at this time. So now we're going to lay it back out. And this is what it looks like in your book, this alignment. And don't worry if you see your threads there, that's something that we will worry about later. We're going to take our next one of our matching 3. And this is how we're going to arrange it. Our darkest diamond is always going to touch our center, and our light triangle that matches our center is going to point out. Sometimes you can get twisted around, put things on like this. It's obviously a little too long here, but that's your double check to yourself, is you want your dark diamond here in the middle and your light triangle on the outside. So we are going to put these 2 on top of each other. And we are going to pin in a few places to make sure things don't move. So we're going to use our blunt corner here with our blunt corner here. Pin. And our blunt corner here is going to line up there. This is why it's helpful to trim those extra points earlier on in our project. And then our seams here do lay on top of each other, so we're going to line those up. And we're going to pin here. And we're going to head back to the machine and we're going to sew the complete length of this seam. From here on out, we're going to sew full seams until we get back to that partial seam. So we're going to go sew this full seam. So back in my machine, I'm going to sew the length of this seam. And since these are large blocks, this is a longer seam. So if you would like to have additional pins in the middle, go ahead. It can be helpful here to use a stiletto. Make sure that your seam doesn't flip the other way. Make sure to remove pins as you go. Never want to sew over a pin. And this is the end of my block here. One of the 3 sides of my block is going to end up exposed in my quilt. So if you'd like to backstitch here, you can go ahead and do that. And then again, I'm going to sew onto my leader ender. And head back on over to the iron to press this. Now that I have sewn this long seam, it is time to press it. And again, I'm going to press this open so that things lay as flat as possible. So I'm going to flip it to the back. And this time I am going to press this whole seam. Here I only pressed the small bit that I needed. So I'm going to finger press. And press this complete seam. Make sure things stay nice and opened up there. Okay. Now it is time to add my last piece to complete this first pink block. Just like the second piece, it's going to be arranged so that my dark pink diamond goes here on the inside. My light pink triangle is over here. So I'm going to move this first piece out of the way since I don't want to get that caught up. So I'm just going to fold that out of the way. Take this piece, fold it on top, and again, pin it in place and sew it just as I sewed the previous seam. I've gone ahead and sewn and pressed that seam. And I'm back here at my iron as I just pressed it. And now it is time to complete this final seam. So this is where we started with this partial seam. And now we're going to flip this over and we're going to pin along here so that we can complete this seam. So we're going to take and start with a pin here. And this corner is going to line up with this blunt corner. And then this seam is going to line up with this seam. And then we're going to put at least another pin in here to where we're going. And then I do suggest you sew about an inch overlap to make sure it's nice and secure. You don't want to keep going though because you have a complete diamond here. So if you sewed there, then you would end up with some lumpy bumps in your quilt, not what you're looking for. So I'm going to stick another one in here, one more for good measure, and head back on over to my sewing machine to sew this last part to complete my pink block. Back at my sewing machine with this partial seam pinned, and I'm going to go ahead and sew my scant 1/4 inch seam, and I'm going to overlap here at the bottom as I mentioned. And since I know that I'm starting with the outside of my block, I am going to backstitch here. So I'm going to take that pin out, couple stitches forward, couple back. And remove my pins as I go. Partial seams can seem intimidating if you've never done them before, but they're really quite simple. Just take a little bit of time and planning to make sure you're putting everything in the right place. But they're much easier than a Y seam or other type of set-in seam. So I'm going to make sure I'm going right for my line there. And I am using a thread here that contrasts so that you can see where I'm sewing. If I wasn't doing this on camera, I would be using a pink thread that would blend in a little more. Go ahead, take this piece off. And I'm going to head on over to my iron to press it to finish my pink block. And then I'm going to repeat the steps to create all 6 of my colored large triangle blocks. I have completed all 6 of my blocks and I've put them back up here on my design wall. These are large blocks, so working on my tabletop is not an option at this point, as you can see, so I have them behind me. The next step is on page 55 in your book, and we're going to sew these 6 blocks into a quilt top. And this should seem familiar to what we did a few weeks ago with Rookie of the Year, which was also 6 pizza slices, as I like to say. So we're going to begin by sewing this one to this one, and then we'll add this one, and we'll sew this one to this one, and then add this one. And then when we have 2 halves, we'll sew those 2 halves together. Since we are working with long seams here, I do suggest pinning. So we're going to go ahead, take this one, place it right sides together with this one. And I suggest pinning at the intersections where the colors match. So here I have that long seam here that I just put together up on my design wall. And as you can see here, I have a point on this one, but I don't have a point on this one to do the hang pin. So I'm simply going to line up this diagonal line as best as possible on top of this one and pin those in place. And my seam allowance here on the pink one, that should line up with that point there. So that is another double check to myself. Right there should line up with this point right here. So I'm going to line those up. Take a pin, stick 2 in just to keep it nice and secure. And then here, this is where I said like we don't have an opportunity to nest because we have one going this way and one going this way. So again, that point right here should line up with this line here. And one nice thing about this is that it is pretty forgiving because we're working with such large, bold triangles of color. If anything is off, you know, by an eighth or a small amount at this point, people aren't really going to see unless they get super up close to the quilt top, because what they're just going to see is these big, bold triangles of color. They're going to see a triangle of pink, a triangle of, or red, depending on your fabric choices, triangle of purple, so forth and so on. So don't stress too much about the alignment of these. Grab another pin. And then I am going to pin the ends. I have my blunt points there, so I know exactly what to line up. And again, right here. And we're sewing with the same thing we've been doing so far, which is the scant 1/4 inch seam. And at this point, I would recommend changing to a neutral thread of some kind if you sewed each of your blocks in a singular color. I have a 2600 medium gray RFL that I like because it blends into kind of everything, and that's what I have in my machine. So I'm just going to begin, and since I know this is the outside of my seam, I am going to backstitch a little bit. There is no border that is going to get added onto this, so I want to make sure that that seam is not going to come apart before quilting. I'm just going to remove my pins as I go and sew down the length of this seam. Grab my stiletto, and I'm going to remove these pins. I'm going to use my stiletto to make sure everything stays nice and flat. No race, so I like to do these seams nice and slow, especially when I get to intersections. Now I'm going to go ahead and go sew back onto my leader ender and go get my next triangle. I mentioned I'm going to go get my next triangle, but actually my next step, I almost forgot, is to press. So I'm going to head on over to the iron, and I'm going to press this seam open just the way that I've pressed all the other seams in this quilt. And then once I have this seam pressed open, I can go ahead and add my orange triangle. I have these two sewn and pressed, and so now I'm going to go ahead and add my third triangle to complete the top half of my quilt. So again, just as I did with the previous two, I'm going to place these right sides together and head over to my machine, pin all these intersections, and sew the length of this seam. Have my third triangle sewn. So now the top half is complete. I'm going to go ahead and press this and move on to sewing these two together to begin sewing the bottom half of my quilt. I've now completed both halves of my quilt, and it's kind of hard to get them up on the design wall now that they're fully sewn, but I'm gonna kind of put them vertical for you to see. So this is what was previously my bottom half, which is my blue, my green, and my yellow. And this is what was previously my top half, which is my purple, my pink, and my corally orange. So now the next step is to sew this big long center seam. And the most important part of this big long center seam is this center point where I have all 6 colors coming together. So I'm going to do a hang pin to make sure I get that perfect. So I'll give you a quick refresher at the machine on how to do a hang pin. We have done a hang pin a few times now, but I'll give you a refresher nonetheless. And what a hang pin is going to do is going to help us perfectly line up right where that green point and that pink point are coming together, so that when we sew that seam, all 6 of our points are perfectly going to match. So hang pin is simply starting with 1 pin, and we're going to put it through that intersection. We're going to make sure that we come out perfectly in the middle of this side. And as you can see, this seam's coming apart a little bit. That's okay because of where this is. If that was coming apart past that, I would definitely go back right now and stitch that a little more. But so that pin is coming through right at the middle. I'll double check, make sure I'm right at the middle there. Okay. And now I'm going to go right through the center here. And as you can see, this looks a little scant. And this is why the hang pin is going to be so helpful, is it's going to make accommodations for any errors that I've had up until now and just make sure that those points perfectly line up. So what we want to do with the hang pin is we want to make sure that we don't get it crooked one way or the other, that it is perfectly perpendicular with our fabric. It's kind of hard to show you sometimes, and keep the angle right for myself. So let's get those together. So it looks like this. And now I'm going to go ahead and place 2 pins, one on either side, to hold this in place so that I can take my hang pin out and head on over to my machine. Now, this seam is a nice long seam, and the last thing I want to do is have to take out this entire seam. So I am just going to sew this 1-inch section right now over at my machine. You can kind of think of it as basting thread that you're not going to remove unless it's wrong, and then you can easily remove it and make adjustments. And then once we have this perfect, we can sew the full length of the seam. Okay, so I'm just going to take this off and trim off my little leader ender, take out my pins. And let's open this up and see how it turned out. And it looks like it shifted a little bit. Tends to happen to me when I'm on camera sometimes. So it looks like that my green point is a little bit further over here from the pink. That's about a 1/16, but it's enough to bug me since it's the center of this quilt. So I am going to grab my seam ripper and take this out, and I am going to do the hang pin again and adjust until I get this perfectly lined up. Okay, so I redid that and I am much happier with this time. It's still not perfect, but it is pretty darn close to perfect. So what I'm going to do now is fold this back together, and I'm going to pin the rest of my intersections just like I did when I was sewing 2 triangles together, and I'm going to sew the length of the seam to complete my quilt top. As I approach the center here, I'm just going to go nice and slow, and I'm going to sew right on top of the thread that is already there from when I sewed my center points. Sometimes there's a lot of bulk, you can get stuck, so just slowly move it along. Your stiletto's your friend. And continue sewing the rest of the seam. I've now finished piecing and pressing my quilt top, and I am super happy with how it came out. I used Free Spirit solids this time, and I switched up my reds, made them a little more pink, went with coral, and I'm very happy with my fabric selection. Sometimes you just don't know how it's all gonna come together until you see it together. So the next step is now to get this quilted and bound. I have not decided how I am going to quilt this yet, but I will tell you how I quilted the original one. Teresa Silva of Quilting is My Bliss custom quilted the Color Wheel Quilt. Each piece is framed with echo quilting. The triangles are filled in with swirls, and the diamonds are filled in with serpentines. The curves of the swirls and serpentines contrast with the sharpness of the shapes to make for a fun and inviting quilt to play and lounge with. Once you get it back from the quilter, it's time to bind it. I obviously can't bind this yet because it's not quilted. I will go over how to bind a hexagon next week, but if you are ready for it now, I'm going to link below to when I showed how to bind a hexagon when we did Nebula last year, I think. Yeah, last year. So I will have that below, and then after next week's videos live, I'll add that link too, so that you'll have it in the Quilts for Baby and Beyond whole array of videos. So thank you so much for joining us here today. I hope you have enjoyed making your color wheel quilt, and I can't wait to see yours. Please share it on social media using #JaybirdBaby. And if you have enjoyed this video, please be sure to like it, leave us a comment. We love your comments, and subscribe to the channel. And I will be back here next week to teach you how to do the final quilt for the sew along, which is Tummy Time All Star.